Happy Wednesday, everyone. This lesson is on percents and decimals, but first we're going to review conversions of fractions and decimals as well. And just to review, when you change a fraction to decimal, you just need to remember to divide. Make sure you copy this down. So for example, if you have the fraction 3/5, when you divide, the numerator goes inside the division house, so it's going to be 3 divided by 5. And before you start dividing, you want to put a decimal point at the end. 5 goes into 3 0 times, so you add a 0 to keep dividing. And 5 goes into 36 times. 6 times 5 is 30. You're left with 0 remainder. So your final answer is just 0 and 6/10. So 3/5 is equal to 0 and 6/10. And we'll be using this skill in one of the later topics on the notes. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so to change a decimal to a fraction, you just remember to say it. So for example, again, you should be writing all this down. If you have 0.08, we don't say 0.08. Instead, we remember our place value, and 8 is in the hundredths place. So when you say this correctly, this would be 8 hundredths. And obviously, you simplify this, and traditionally, you can divide both numbers by 4, or you can use your prime factorization method. So if you remember this, you can do 2 times 2 times 2, all over 5 times 5 times 2 times 2. Apologize for the sloppy writing. And when you cross these out, you're left with 2/25. Now let's move on to decimal to percent. And before you write anything down, I just want you to watch what's going to happen first. So let's say you wanted to change this decimal to percent. And the reason why you can change it to percent is because fractions, decimals, and percents all represent parts of a whole. So to change a decimal to percent, the longer way is to say it. So 63 hundredths is the proper name for this decimal. And you know that percent means out of 100, so this is really just 63%. Now the faster way, and this is what I want you to write down, if you have 63 hundredths, you should just notice that when you change your decimal to percent, all you do is you move the decimal 2 times to the right, 1, 2, and you add a percent sign. So 63 hundredths is 63%. So the step for changing decimal to percent, please write this down. You move the decimal 2 times to the right, or 2 places to the right. And again, you can always pause the video if the writing is too fast. Okay, moving on to the next topic. Same thing with percent to decimal. There is a faster way, but let's go over the mathematical way, the way to understand it. So to change a percent to decimal, let's say you have 37%. Don't write this down. So 37% means 37 out of 100. And when you say it, 37 hundredths, the same way as writing it as 0.37. So if you notice, the faster way to change a percent to a decimal, and this is what you should write down, is you take your percent, you drop your percent sign, so you pretend that's not there anymore, and then you move the decimal that's at the end 2 times to the left. So 37% is the same as 37 hundredths. So to show your work, you just have to go 1, 2. And the decimal always starts at the end. So for the steps on this one, just write move decimal 2 times to the left. Think of Beyonce, that song of hers, to the left, to the left. All right, on to the next topic. To change a fraction to a percent, there are 2 methods. The first one that we learned in part 1 of this chapter is that if you have a fraction like 3/5, for example, since you know that percent means out of 100, you can just write this as the equivalent fraction out of 100. So times 20 times 20, and that equals 60 hundredths, and 60 out of 100 is 60%. But you're not always going to get fractions where the denominator can go into 100. For example, you might get a fraction like 5/8. Now 8 cannot go into 100. So in a situation where you have a fraction that you can't just go into 100, you're going to have to first change it to a decimal. So divide 5 divided by 8, add a decimal point at the end, add a 0 so that you can keep dividing. 8 goes to 56 times. 6 times 8 is 48. Subtract, that leaves me with 2. bring down another 0. 8 goes into 20 twice. 2 times 8 is 16. Subtract. Bring down another 0. You keep going until you have no remainder left, or if you see a pattern. 8 goes into 45 times. So here, 5/8 is equal to 0.625. Now if you look at our work from the previous topic on decimal to percent, so now to change 0.625 to a percent, you just move the decimal 2 times to the right, like we said. So this time we go 1, 2. So 0.625 is the same as 62.5%. Okay, so to review again, to change a fraction where the denominator can't go into 100, you divide to make it a decimal. This is what I did here. Once you get your decimal, move the decimal 2 times to the right to make it a percent. And for percent to fraction, this one is an easy one we learned in this beginning. You remember that percent means out of 100. So percent out of 100. So if you have any percent, for example, let's say you have 90%, 90% just is equivalent to 90 out of 100. And anything that becomes a fraction, you want to simplify if possible. So I noticed that 90 and 100 can both be divided by 10. So my final answer is just 9/10. And that is how you change fractions to decimals to percents and convert among the three. Now we're going to quickly go into small and large percents. Now small percents are percents that are less than 1%. So for example, you don't need to write this down. Let's say you have, a candy bar that's split up into 100 pieces, because percent means out of 100. So you split this up into 100 pieces. Now 1% would mean you have one piece out of 100, right? If you have less than 1%, you're actually taking that little piece that you have, that one piece, and splitting it up even more. So less than 1% is a pretty small part of a number. Now all you need to write down for this section is how to change small percents to small percents to decimals. So let's say you have a small percent like 0.13%. Now, I know it looks as though this is already a decimal. Again, we're trying to change percents to decimals. Please write this down. To change a percent to a decimal, look at your notes. To change a percent to decimal, we move the decimal 2 times to the left. Okay? Now here, the decimal is already there for you. So when we change this percent to a decimal, we still move it 2 times to the left. 1, 2. So 13/100%, this equals 0.0013. We fill in those gaps with 0 as a placeholder. So this 0.13% is really a small number. It's 0.0013. Now on the flip side, large percents are pretty large. So don't write this part down. I just want to show you through pictures. Let's say you have this candy bar again. If you have one whole candy bar, that's 100%. If you have 2 whole candy bars, that's 200%. Okay? So 1 candy bar is 100%, 2 candy bars is 200%. So now we're going to go into how to change large percents to decimals. And you do the same step. To change a percent to a decimal, all you do is move the decimal 2 times to the left still. So let's say you have a large percent like 178%. Now notice here I don't have a decimal. So when your percent doesn't have a decimal, the decimal is really just at the end, and you move it 2 times to the left, 1, 2. So 178% is equivalent to 1.78. So you basically have one whole candy bar and 78 hundredths left over. Now for the last section of our notes, we're going to find the percent of a number. So again, it's questions like if you have 30% of 20 people walk home from school, how many people walk home? So you're finding the percent of a total amount. Now there's a faster way that we've been rather than what we've been doing before. So before we've been setting up proportions. Now to find the percent of a number, so let's say we have a problem like 30% of 80. So let's say there were 80 students walking home, and 30% of them walking home walk only a mile from school. So what percent of those 80 students live only a mile from school? Follow these steps. You change your percent to a decimal. So to change 30% to decimal, you go 2 times to the left, 1, 2. Of just becomes times, and 80 still stays as 80. So to get your answer, you're going to have to do 0.30 times 80. Now I'm going to do that right over here. And it doesn't matter if you put 80 at the top or 0.30 at the top. So 0 times 0 is 0, 0 times 8 is 0. On your second line, you want to automatically put a 0 because you're multiplying by 3 in a different place value. 3 times 0 is 0. 3 times 8 is 24. When you add that up, you get 0, 0, 4, 2. Oops, that's a little bright. And you look at how many decimal digits are in your problem. So I notice I have 2 decimal digits. So my answer will also have 2 decimal digits. So 0.30 times 80, otherwise 30% of 80, is the same as or equal to 24. So 24 students live only a mile from school if 30% of them live a mile from school. So if you have any questions, please bring them to class tomorrow. We'll review all these topics again before we start the work. And hope you have a good day. Bye-bye.